All right. Well, we've got a few people here, and I think a few people are going to be coming in. Just to make sure everybody's oriented, one, I want to welcome everybody. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but to make sure everybody's oriented, there is a chat box down at the bottom. You should be able to open up the webinar chat, and you're more than welcome to place questions in there. I'm going to put some information in there, basically a link I'm going to put in there. But we can use that to communicate during this webinar today. This webinar is being recorded and it is being posted. It's actually being broadcasted live on YouTube right now. So I want to make sure I have all my stuff going here. I am going to share my screen to make sure you guys get all the information and we can get started. So first things first, I am going to share a link in the chat because I'm going to refer to it a couple of different times. So I want to make sure that that's available to everybody. All right, there we go. There's the chat. It also should flash up at you with me posting that in there. So you should be able to see the chat on your end. And again, I want you to put any questions in there. So I want to welcome everybody. I want to, I don't know, this is one of my favorite things to talk about as far as a way to improve your type 2 diabetes and overall your health. So I want to welcome everybody and tell you how excited I am to talk to you about this. If you have not, I want to make a couple announcements. Again, in the chat box, I do want you to put any specific obstacles to exercising, to working out that you specifically have. I'm going to go over some of those obstacles that other people have mentioned to me later on in this webinar. But if you have anything specific, I definitely want to hear about those. Suzanne, I see that you raised your hand. If you can put anything that you have in the chat box and I will come to you before the end of the webinar, that's perfectly fine. If you're just raising your hand to say, yeah, I have a problem, I definitely have obstacles and resistance to working out, girl, you're not the only one. But put any specific obstacles, any obstacles that you feel are unique to you, I want to make sure that I cover those during this webinar so you get the help that you need. If you don't follow me on Facebook or Instagram, part of the reason I think about this is if you do follow me on Instagram, you know I got chickens, I got hens in the spring, and hens are allowed in the city and roosters, as it turns out, aren't. And one of those hens has actually grown into a rooster, even though I thought I was buying a hen. So I can hear a rooster crowing. I don't know if you can hear it crowing, but I can hear it crowing. If you don't follow me on Instagram, I highly recommend you do, because you can see these kind of crazy things that go on in my life available to you in my Instagram feed. But follow on Instagram and Facebook. Both of those places I announce these kinds of webinars, and I also share with you things like hens that turn into roosters. There is also a Facebook group. It's called Reversing Diabetes with Elaine MD. It's a Facebook group. Go and join that. I will be going live in there next week for a question and answer and a coaching session. So if that's help you're looking for, that's available to everybody. Go ahead and sign up in there. All right. Some things are going off in the chat box. My chat box says it's disabled. That makes me so sad. Let me see if I can enable the chat box. I cannot from here. I don't think so. I will keep trying to do that. So if you have questions, send them through your, there's a Q&A tab, send it through there. I don't know that I'm going to be able to enable the chat box. That really disappoints me. I think we're gonna have to live with that. But if you have questions, send them through the Q&A box. And then any of your obstacles, again, I want to make sure that I'm covering specific obstacles to working out here today. So if you have anything specific, make sure you put it in the question and answer box. Thank you, Maricela, for letting me know. All right, so let's talk about it. Let's dive into what we are going to get into today. We will not be talking about, and I kind of gave a prelude to this in any of the marketing that I put out for this webinar. We are not going to be talking about eating less and moving more. We're not going to discuss any of those strategies. That's the typical discussion you will hear from your primary care provider or your, healthcare provider. It's a hard thing to hear because typically we're hearing this advice from people who are clearly either not practicing the eat less or move more philosophy, or they're not able to make it work. And the reason that it doesn't work for our doctors is the same reason it won't work for you, is because the formula is broken. It just does not work. Exercise does not have anything to do with the things that you're eating. Okay. This is, there's no way. And I say this a lot and it's really witty and entertaining and it's not even mine. I stole it from somebody, but it's very true more than it's witty and entertaining. You cannot outrun the fork. There's just no way to undo the food that you have eaten. Your body has to go through processing that food. And part of processing that food is what creates insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Okay. So we won't be talking about that. What we will be talking about today is exercise as a tool. That's actually how I teach it to help you reverse your type 2 diabetes. It is a tool where you're going to talk about how it works and learn how to use it as a tool to fix your type 2 diabetes. The things that I teach my clients are tools. All of them are tools. You're going to get a toolbox full of tools, and you're going to be able to bring out a hammer when you need it and a saw on other times you need it. Maybe you need a screwdriver here. Okay. I teach tools like cleaning up your diet. I teach tools like intermittent fasting. I teach nutritional ketosis, stress management techniques, sleep management, how to manage the holidays and vacations. I teach all sorts of different tools to my clients to help them learn to reverse their diabetes and do that for a lifetime. I will offer that none of the tools that I teach are as slick as the tool of exercise. I'm not saying it's the most effective. Again, you're not going to outrun a diet of Twinkies with exercise. Like, that's not going to happen. But the way that it works is very, very slick. And so I really do. It's almost like a magic trick. It's really, really clever. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about how to implement it. So exercise is important to fixing your diabetes for a number of reasons. First, it's just another tool in your toolbox, which is what we're trying to get very, very ample and plump. We're trying to get a robust toolbox so that we have different things that we can do to fix our health, to improve our health. Exercise is also important because it improves your body's use of glucose. It makes your cells use glucose better and easier. It improves your cardiopulmonary, your heart and your lung health. It's also an active form of stress release. It's just another reason that this is important. It is an active form of stress release for our bodies to de-stress. It allows you to play like a kid. I'm like, for the love of all that's holy, why not? 7-year-olds call exercise recess, and it's their favorite part of the day. Why are we not all doing this? Lastly, again, it's a powerful and very clever tool to fixing your type 2 diabetes that is really not utilized enough. So women come to me and they feel very stuck in this unbreakable cycle with insulin resistance. My brain knows the biology of what's happening. What their brain sees is no matter what I eat, it doesn't matter. My blood sugars stay high and I don't seem to have any control. Okay. Biologically, what's happening is you have a cycle that's going on, a cycle that looks like my cells have insulin resistance. That insulin resistance keeps my blood sugars high. My elevated blood sugars make my pancreas spit out more insulin. The more insulin that's around keeps my cells more insulin resistant. That insulin resistance keeps my blood sugars high. That blood sugar being high makes my pancreas spit out more insulin, which keeps my cells more insulin resistant. It keeps us in this cycle that takes a very long time. It is entirely possible to alter the food that we eat to lower our blood sugar through those tools like intermittent fasting and cleaning up your diet, nutritional ketosis. That does lower your body's production of insulin, and that's important. But it takes time, weeks or months of eating that way before your cells start to respond to that tool. Okay, so if this sounds like you, if you've had this experience, I want you to know that there is help. And exercise is part of that, and it's a very powerful tool because what it does is it actually overrides the insulin resistance in the cell. So I have a schematic representation here. It's stolen. I'm not sure. I mean, I picked it off the web, so I don't know who it's stolen from, but I do want everybody to know that it is not mine. I am not responsible for this. I found this because I do not have the artistic skill, even with paper, much less trying to be an artist on a computer. That is not my skill set. So I found these diagrams on the internet. I'm going to light my highlighter here so that you can see this. So these cells that you're seeing are normal, what we call insulin sensitive cells. They are not insulin resistant. They are not diabetic cells. They are normally functioning cells in the human body. What is supposed to happen with insulin, again, the way I describe it, if you've heard me talk about it, is we have insulin. Insulin causes our cells to open up and bring in blood sugar, right? So how this looks is we have, and this red part here is an insulin receptor, and you have this little round molecule of insulin. This round molecule of insulin fits inside this red receptor. That then sends a message within the cell to this blue channel, and it tells it to open up and allow these blue glucose molecules to go inside the cell. And that's what you're seeing here. You see there's this binding of the red insulin ball to the red insulin receptor, and then a message comes through the inside of the cell that causes this blue channel to open and bring these glucose molecules inside. This is how it should be working, okay? With insulin resistance, in a non-insulin sensitive cell and in an insulin resistant cell, what we see is this is blocked. It's not, it's closed essentially. Where this round part has been open, it's now closed, which means it can't accept this insulin molecule, which means that internal triggering to open this glucose channel does not happen. So we don't get glucose inside of the cell, and instead it builds up outside of the cell. And that's what doctors and medical providers pick up on blood sugar readings as high blood sugars, okay? I'm going to try to shut this off because it doesn't let me use my mouse then. Oh, well, okay, here, maybe I can do it this way. I apologize. So how do we fix it? Improving insulin resistance is always the key to fixing type 2 diabetes. That is the thing that we need to do. We need to improve our insulin resistance. There are a number of tools that do this. Again, cleaning up your diet. When you're eating foods that don't cause your pancreas, they don't cause a huge blood sugar surge, which causes the pancreas to make a bunch of insulin, suddenly you don't have so much insulin floating around and your cells heal. But again, that takes time, right? Cleaning up your diet is a tool. Intermittent fasting, same thing. You're narrowing the time of a day that you expose your cells to insulin, and that allows that insulin level to drop really low and heal your cells up. But again, it takes time. Nutritional ketosis, another tool, does the same thing. Lowers the amount of insulin that your pancreas is producing so that your cells can heal up, but it takes time. So exercise is different, and it's clever, and it's cool. It is a powerful tool because it overrides the insulin resistance, okay? So if we go back to this picture here, it overrides this part. What that means is it allows glucose to come inside the cell without having to bind insulin at all. So it turns on this glucose channel, not using this insulin, but by another mechanism. So suddenly we don't have to rely on this primary way that our cells bring glucose inside, and instead we can just bring that glucose inside. We fuel our cells and we lower our blood sugar that way, okay? So what that means then is you're not getting a constant trigger to your pancreas saying make more insulin, which keeps you insulin resistant. Instead, you just bring that glucose level down, you shut the message off to the pancreas that says make more insulin, and suddenly your cells aren't exposed to insulin and they're allowed to heal more quickly. Okay, you break this cycle of having the insulin resistant cells that keep your blood sugars high, making your pancreas make more insulin, which keep your cells insulin resistant. You break that cycle. This is why exercise, this is like the crux of the matter, guys. If you're shopping for shoes, come back to me. This is the really important part, is that we can start utilizing glucose in a way that's irrelevant of our insulin resistance. So through this webinar and this PowerPoint, these slides, you've seen lots of pictures of me exercising or doing exercisey things. A lot of times there was a lot of sweat involved in a lot of these pictures. This is a picture of me. I think this was in Colorado, but it was taken this summer. And I also went to Sturgis and the trail there was similar, but I think this is in Colorado. I had pictures of me on top of mountains, all of these other things. We're going to talk about, I put those in there because I think that maybe seeing those pictures are more entertaining than seeing stock photos. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but do understand that one way is not the right way. We're going to talk about that. There's a lot of different ways to do this. But before we talk about how to do it, I want you to pump the brakes for just a moment and hold the phone. Diabetics really should have an evaluation by their provider, by their medical provider before they start to dive into an exercise routine. Okay. So before we get started on the things that you can do and the hows and all of that, I want you to stop and call your doctor or your primary care provider, whomever that might be, make an appointment to get a basic clearance. Okay. In the program, in my group program, I break down clearly to my clients about who requires a clearance and who doesn't. That's beyond the scope of this, but I do want you to see that some people, most diabetics, many diabetics could require that exercise evaluation to make sure you're safe enough to exercise. So make that appointment. In the meantime, brisk walking is safe. Do not postpone setting yourself up with exercise in the form of brisk walking until you see the doctor. Don't do it after you see the doctor. Start the brisk walking, make the appointment. 3 weeks from now, you see the doctor, then you can start increasing your intensity. Okay. Brisk walking gives you benefits, cardiovascular and lung benefits, but it also gets you in the habit of carving out time from your life, carving out the space of time in your life for you to start dedicating to you and your exercise and your health. So before you start getting really sweaty, I want you to see your medical provider and get clearance. In the meantime, start walking. You guys remember, it's all about I have to sleep well at night, so I have to know you all are safe. And part of that is the reason that I get those warnings. So how? There are 100 ways to exercise. There are definitely very specific recommendations by the American Diabetes Association and the American College of Sports Medicine. They made a joint statement about exercise in diabetics. It's awesome. You can check it out online, and there's a lot of very specific things about that. But before you dive in to all of those specifics, the basics of it, get sweaty. You have to get sweaty. Your body has to get sweaty for you to stimulate that switching into your cells using glucose in a way that doesn't utilize insulin. So you have to get sweaty. That's first and foremost. If you're not getting sweaty, it's not enough. Okay. Like if you're waiting to get cleared by your primary care provider and you're doing a brisk walk, you may not get sweaty. What you are doing is starting to work your muscles so that they aren't as sore when you do get sweaty. You're starting to work your heart and your lungs so that they manage it better when you do start getting sweaty. And you're starting to, again, carve out that time for you and your health whenever you get that clearance from that primary care provider or whoever it is that you're going to get clearance from. But you have to get sweaty before you turn on this mechanism that bypasses that insulin resistance, okay? So you're going to want to get sweaty. You're going to want to do it for 45 to 60 minutes a day. This can really be anything. Running, walking, biking, swimming, arc trainer, ellipticals, rowing machine, hot yoga, saunas, steam rooms. Yes, that's right, saunas and steam rooms. The literature says that they mimic cardiovascular benefits. So if your knees hurt, great, go sit in a sauna for 20 to 45 minutes. That seems like such a long time in a sauna, but 20 minutes is kind of the place where you start to see that benefit in sauna and steam rooms. There are definitely benefits, physiologic benefits to sauna and steam room, to this heat exposure, okay? And it does the same thing. It improves the insulin sensitivity. So it reverses the insulin resistance of the cells and improves insulin sensitivity for type 2 diabetics. How long are you supposed to do it? This is a picture of me on the top of like the tallest peak in Colorado, which isn't that much taller than the rest of the peaks in Colorado. So I don't, that's not important. What is important is I took a wrong turn on this hike, which made my hike, took my hike from about 12 miles to about 16 miles that day. So I was hiking for a very long time. You don't have to do it that long. In fact, I would offer to you that I'm going to give you what the recommendations are. You don't even have to do it that long. Do not let these recommendations block you from getting started. The recommendation is 150 to 300 minutes of moderate to intensive aerobic activity, or 300 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity, or 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous mixed with moderate. Okay, so there's a couple different ways to do this. 150 to 300 minutes a week sounds like a ton. 75 to 150 minutes a week, if you're doing nothing, sounds like a ton. Don't worry, the recommendations also include recommendations on weightlifting and resistance training, and recommendations on stability and flexibility training. So there's a lot of things in there. It's real simple, guys. You don't need to be bogged down by those specifics. Just start moving. Start moving today. Don't become overwhelmed. Don't allow your brain to go to this overwhelm by these recommendations. Just start moving. Start today with 1 mile. Not 60 minutes today. Start today with 1 mile. Remember, 1 mile is better than the no miles that you did yesterday. This is one of those situations where something is better than nothing. Okay? Doing something is better than nothing. I think of, I say this in the group when I talk about like healing your cells from insulin resistance. People will be like, well, how long do I have to fast? And in my brain, I'm always like, it's kind of like having the housekeeper at your house. I mean, if she's there 2 hours, that's awesome. But if she's there 6 hours, that's even better. Okay? That's what I feel about fasting. This is also what I feel about exercise. Maybe 3 miles is better than 1 mile, but 1 mile is better than nothing. Okay? So, and remember, there's like wisdom in allowing yourself to just start somewhere. Say you start walking, say you start running, say you start swimming, say you start biking. And maybe your body, maybe you don't like it. Maybe that's not your exercise of choice. Maybe it's easy, so sometimes you'll choose to do it, but it's not what you love. Awesome. You don't want to commit 60 minutes a day to doing it if you don't like it. Okay. In addition to not wanting to commit all of these hours in a day to something that you don't like, or all these minutes in a day to something you don't like, you may also find that doing 60 minutes, immediately after doing nothing, your body is sore. It's physically sore. The next day is miserable because all of your muscles are sore. This is no way to keep or stick at doing something for a lifetime, okay? Give yourself permission to start at a lower amount of activity, build into it. This is a great time. If this is what you're struggling with, like, yeah, I know what I should do, and I launch it, and then I never get past it. This is a time where if you find yourself doing that a lot, a diabetes reversal assessment call. Go to my Calendly. I was going to put it in the chat box, but the chat box won't work. Calendly. So it's www.calendly. It's CALENDLY. Calendly.com. And that's a /Delane MD. And you'll get to my page and you can schedule an assessment call. It's a 45-minute call where we sit down, we figure out what your biggest obstacles are and why you haven't been able to overcome them so you can learn how to do that. Okay. So if that's what you find, that you get bogged down with these details about how long you should be doing it and what you should be doing, and you become overwhelmed and you don't do it, or you do it and you become so sore that you can't continue it. All of these things are obstacles that are keeping you from utilizing this really, really powerful tool for helping you reverse your type 2 diabetes. So other obstacles. I am going to review some of the obstacles that people have brought to me and go over those. I really do want you to put any obstacles that you know that you have in the Q&A box. Just open that Q&A box. That will come to me. It doesn't go to anybody else. It just comes to me. And put what those are, your obstacles are, and then I'll make sure to talk about them. This is something that we work on in those diabetes reversal assessment calls. where we figure out what the obstacles are and then how to move, like why you haven't been able to move beyond them so you can figure out how. So the first obstacle that I'm going to talk about is perfectionism. And this goes back to the whole, I just gave you 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity exercise that you should be doing every week. Hold the phone, calm down. When we think we have to do it perfectly, how long we've got to do it, what do we have to do? I need to add weights, I need to do yoga. It gets us all excited and we get overwhelmed and we resist it. So don't do that. Fight the urge to be perfect. Resist the urge to be perfect. Give it a solid no thank you. I'm not doing that today. We have a thought in our brain, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And it's not helpful. This is going to keep you from growing in to the person who exercises. Okay. If you think about the person that exercises, I mean, like, I started running when I was 15 and I literally started with a mile loop. And I did a mile loop until I was I did a mile or 2 miles until I was 18 or 19. And I was young. I mean, like, that was when it was going to be the easiest thing it was going to be. Over years, I've added mileage, right? And even now, like, I'll do 3 to 6 or 7 miles depending on the day. I don't do 15-mile runs a day. I'm not running for an hour and a half a day. I don't do that. So not focusing on the perfectionism of I need to do it a certain way, it needs to look like this, allows you to grow into that person that exercises on a regular basis. Okay. I am doing a podcast. The podcast this week will be broadcasted either tomorrow or the next day, but it is talking about why we don't want to be exercise. And it's not just the exercise, it's going to be applied to the food and all of the things. But it's the neurochemistry that keeps us from wanting to do that, okay? If we set ourselves with these huge, perfect expectations, the mountain is so much taller than if we just allow ourselves to work into it, okay? And to becoming that person that exercises on a regular basis. So say no thank you to perfectionism. That is probably the biggest obstacle that I see with women that I work with. The other big obstacle that I see is really based on the motivational triad. Okay. So the motivational triad is a hardwired part of all the brains, all the animal brains, not just all the human brains. Okay. The motivational triad is based on 3 concepts that motivate us on a very carnal, foundational, archaic level. We look to seek out pleasure, we look to avoid pain, and we want to expend the least amount of energy possible. It's a foundational network of neurons in our brain. In our modern living, staying on the couch, sitting in bed, sitting in a chair, watching paint dry, because of the motivational triad, those things will always sound more appealing than working out. If you are waiting to want to work out, that's not going to happen. And it's not because you're broken. It's because of this foundational neuronal pathway in our brain. It's just the way our brains are wired. Okay. And it really makes sense. 10,000 years ago, you wanted to seek out pleasure because it wasn't going to harm you. You wanted to avoid pain because it might harm you. And you wanted to expend the least amount of energy possible because there wasn't a lot of energy around. You had to actually work to procure food, unlike sitting on the couch, Netflixing and chilling, and eating food. The food gives us pleasure, the couch gives us safety, and laying there with a remote gives us the least amount of energy that we could possibly expend to seek out pleasure and avoid pain. Okay? Lots of times people see other people who exercise and they think like, oh, they like it. They're different from me. They want it. They must enjoy that activity. I don't. That's the difference. That's why I can't do it. I want to offer to you every morning that I wake up, and this morning it was 4 a.m. and yesterday it was 4:15 a.m. And probably the time before that it was probably 5 or something. I try to get up sometime between 4 and 5 every morning. This morning when I woke up, when my alarm went off at 4, I did not want to get up. Just like every other being on the planet, my motivational triad kicked in too. I would much rather expend the least amount of energy possible, avoid any pain of bicep curls or runs or squats, and go back into my dreamland where pleasure is, right? Like I would much rather do that than get up and go exercise. Okay. There's nothing unique about people who do exercise and people who don't exercise. All of that desire to stay in bed is driven by this motivation, by the primitive brain and this motivational triad. The podcast that I'm going to dive into this week is going to talk about how do we stop doing that. But do understand that that's kind of, this is just the human experience. We all want to like conserve our energy, which means exercise is going, we have to overcome that primitive desire to conserve energy in order to start exercising on a regular basis. So I am going to, any questions that anybody has, again, put them in the chat or the question and answer. Okay, somebody, can you share a writing list of how long for exercise? A little fast for me to catch. Yes. And in fact, one of the things I was going to put in the chat was the joint statement. And I'm going to try to search for it, although I will be really honest. And I'm going to put it in the question and answer. I'll answer it to you, and I will share what I'm Googling. So what I'm going to Google is ADA and American College of Sports Medicine guidelines, exercise guidelines. So if you Google that, everybody should be able to get to it. I don't know why it's not highlighted for me. Here we go. So I'm going to put it as an answer to you, Anonymous, and hopefully you will get that. But if not, again, the American College of Sports Medicine and the ADA did a joint statement about what exercise for diabetics would be. Caring for patients who are needy and sick, and when I go to help them, I get out of whack because they have their way of eating and I'm expected to eat their way. So, Jenny, you've your question here sounds like it's about the eating, and that when you go to see, maybe you're caring for parents, not patients who are needy and sick. Yeah, so I would offer that one, a couple of things, and I'm going to offer thoughts. There is no science here, right? Like, there's no science that's going to be like, this is the reason that I biologically can't eat Twinkies. If it were that simple, the reason that you wouldn't eat Twinkies or whatever the food is, the fries, the crackers, the rice, the pasta, whatever it might be. If there was a biological reason to not eat those, like for me, I go into anaphylaxis when I eat red meat. Like it's easy for me to tell people. I went to a friend's house this weekend and they served brisket and it looked amazing. And I was like, yeah, I can't eat that. It was so simple. And nobody was like, oh my gosh, you're horrible for not eating that food that makes you anaphylactic, right? Nobody said that. If it were as simple as like, I'm not going to eat the Twinkies because they make me anaphylactic, you wouldn't be having this conversation with me. The issue at hand is that there is a concern of like you're worried you're going to offend them or you feel that they expect you to. And so what I always try to remember is the thought that my family and my loved ones, the people who love me in my life, my friends, they do not want to be the reason that I'm sick and dying of type 2 diabetes. So even if they do have those expectations that I eat the way that they do, even if they don't understand that the food that they're feeding is going to make me sick, I know that they love me and they don't want to be the reason that I'm sick. And from that space, I'm just like, oh, I love you guys so much and I'm not eating that. Right? And yes, they all have opinions and it's okay for them to have their opinions and me to have different opinions. Right? And this happens with my brother. I adore my brother so much. He's such a funny guy. And we have football every Sunday together on football season. We get together and have football, and they serve an entire smorgasbord of all the foods, of all the hot dogs, of all, like the little smokies, the meatballs. There is at least 4 dozen different kinds of cookies. for us to all eat and share. And I'm sure they're delicious, and I never eat any of them, and they know it. And they still serve it. So clearly they're not that torn up about it, right? Other people are there eating, so it's not that big of a deal. So I just say no, thank you. So it does get sticky, Jenny, sometimes when say you're eating and or you're with somebody and all that's served is pasta. Or all that's served, lasagna is always the one that we're like, "Ugh, how do you eat lasagna and not have the noodles?" And you have to make that decision. Like for me, I would entirely plan to only eat the inside of the lasagna. I would not have the noodles. For me, I would also, for pasta, I would just have them give me the pasta sauce, and I would put a hefty amount of cheese on top of it and eat it almost like a stew instead of having the noodles with it. You know, certainly if you can, having some veggie noodles available to you and not the wheat noodles is beneficial, but you don't always have that control. That this weekend when the brisket was served, I did. Not only my friends were so sweet and I hadn't seen them in years and it was so wonderful to see them, but they had this lovely spinach salad that had this like goat cheese in it and it had some tomatoes and cucumbers and red onions and bacon. And of course, I can't eat bacon either. I can't eat any mammalian meat because I got bit by that stupid tick years ago. And so I get sick with it. So I couldn't have the salad they made, and I couldn't have the brisket that they made. And I didn't realize the salad had bacon on it until I got it. And I did pick a few pieces of the spinach out, and they were gracious and of course understood. But yeah, sometimes you sit there and you just watch everybody eat, and it's like, yeah, they're eating. For me, it was like I wasn't there for the food. I was there to see my friends that I hadn't seen in a decade. So that was okay. But and they were gracious about it and had no complaints about it. We had a lovely, lovely visit and it was wonderful. But yeah, sometimes that's what you have to do. You have to be like, I remind myself and I told them, they were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I wish I would have asked." And I was like, "I am not starving to death. Nobody is starving to death today. It's okay. Let's talk. Let's have fun." So that's part of it, um, is kind of making that hard choice between something that's going to make you sick and something that's going to serve your health. And that's a coaching issue. So again, Jenny, if that's part of what you're struggling with, those reversal assessment calls to kind of figure out where that obstacle is showing up for you and why you haven't been able to overcome it is really, really going to be a quality hope for you. Marcella, every time I exercise consistently, I'm wanting to eat more, which often makes it hard to keep up with my intermittent fasting goals. This is why I keep my workouts to 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Is this something that does happen? I don't have this problem. Some people do. I don't have this problem when I work out. There is evidence to support that there are extra hunger drives with exercise. This is something that I intend to discuss in the podcast, but this is an element of top-down behavioral control versus bottom-up. So primitive brain driving our behavior versus prefrontal cortex driving our behaviors. It's kind of like, my mom hates it. I'm so glad my mom's not here. She hates it when I talk about sex in front of people. But it's kind of like if you see somebody who's attractive and you're like, yeah, I'd like to get a piece of that, right? Like there's this drive, but you have top-down regulation of it, right? There is this drive for hunger. You do still have top-down regulation of that behavioral urge. Okay, so you don't have to. Over time, you can retrain your body to where you're not starving or hungry. Certainly, if you are on medications, and this would be part of what you'd get cleared from your primary care provider, when you go to get cleared for exercise, they would review your meds and make sure you're safe. Certainly, there are meds that can drive your blood sugars too low with exercise, and you need to be prepared for that and have a snack available for it. I would never, ever eat a snack that hasn't had proven low blood sugars with it. So you pop your finger, you use your prick machine, you pop your finger and make sure there is truly a low blood sugar before you eat to fix that. Okay. That's one caveat I would give there. Outside of that, if you're on insulin, you probably need to have a snack available. I'm not sure that you are on any kind of med, Maricela. So sometimes it's just a retraining. The other thing, and this is a question that came in the Facebook group, was about like, when do you exercise? When is the best time to exercise? So certainly you can exercise, and that getting sweaty component of the exercise can certainly stimulate epinephrine, And that epinephrine goes to your liver and it tells your liver to make glucose, and your glucose will go high because you're exercising. And that's real. That happens. It's not in your head. It's nothing broken about you. This is a normal response of the human body. My body does it. I wore a continuous glucose monitor for probably 6 weeks. The highest readings I got, hands down, higher than chocolate, higher than ice cream, higher than anything. The highest reading that I got was when I exercised. And according to the CGM, which wasn't accurate, the number was always reading elevated, much higher than my prick machine did. But it would get as high as 170s when I would go for my runs. So definitely the impact of glucose production in exercise during exercise is real and happens. If you are trying to really maximize your fast, that can break your fast. Exercising early in the morning, which is my preferred time to exercise, exercising early in the morning can definitely break your fast if you're having a huge surge of glucose, which will lead to a huge surge of insulin, and the insulin breaks the fast. Okay, fine. So if that's going to happen, then you have to decide, do you want to move your exercise? Do you want to move it to right before your meals, seeing as you're going to eat anyway? You get that initial surge of the glucose with your exercise, and then you have a meal, which also would surge your glucose. So you're going to kind of batch that time that you surge the glucose and the insulin, and then give you a more prolonged break from insulin and food in your fasting window. So that is something that some people do consider. When I first did my insulin resistance, when I reversed that, when I fixed that, when I let my cells heal, I did move my exercise to afternoon right before I ate in order to allow my cells to have more time to heal. I prefer a morning workout. I prefer to just get it out of the way. I end up wanting to do 100 other things during the day, and I don't want to mess with that workout component at 5 p.m. or 5:30. So I prefer to do them in the morning. I have not restimulated insulin resistance from exercise by doing that. So I don't think you have to worry about exercise in the morning causing insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. But I do definitely sometimes, as you're reversing your insulin resistance, sometimes you do have to watch where you place your exercise regimen. No meds. Yeah, that's what I thought. So, yeah, that you can always move the exercise and do it closer to your meal so that since that's driving some hunger, you just get to eat afterwards and then you don't have to retrain your hunger signaling. But it's usually able to be retrained if that's what you want to do. And it is not consistent for everybody. And it certainly is amenable to top-down regulation, which again is that whole like, yes, I have an urge and no, I'm not going to meet it because it's just not the time for it. All right. Great questions, everybody. If there's questions, follow-up questions, don't hesitate to put it in the question and answer box. I'm happy to answer anything that comes up. I'm going to mark these as answered. I'm so disappointed about that chat box, Marcel. Jenny, if you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to. Oh, I didn't. I'm marking those as answered live, meaning that I had answered them, not that we need to pull anybody on. Suzanne, I think that you still have your hand raised. I'm going to allow you to talk if you have a question or want to have anything answered. I don't know if it'll allow you, but I want to make sure I get everybody's. Oh, now you just moved. There, I get it. You just pulled your hand down. I get it. I don't know sometimes why hands go up. So I understand. So again, the last thing, guys, is these diabetes reversal assessment calls. These are 45-minute calls. Again, you can sign up at calendly.com. That's www.calendly. It's calendly.com. And you can get that scheduled. If for some reason my schedule is crazy, don't hesitate to go ahead and email me, Delane@DelaneMD.com, and we will get you scheduled for that. But really, those are 45-minute calls. They're Zoom calls where we talk about what it is that I'm trying to, I'm removing permission to talk, Suzanne, sorry. Um, we can talk about the things that really have kept you stuck in this and what those obstacles are and why they're there. And that's always the first step to overcoming those obstacles. Most people don't come to these calls because they need to be told that chocolate cake causes diabetes. Most people know that. It's really the figuring out why we continue to eat foods, even though we know that they're making us sick. That's the coaching component, and that's really what most people are needing. If that sounds like what you're needing, set up one of those reversal assessment calls, and we can figure out where those obstacles are. I don't see any other questions. Well, maybe I do. Hold on. How much strength training? Yeah, so that's a great question, Maricela. And I do cover this in the group. There's an entire like 20, 30-minute long uh, module where I talk about all the recommendations that are laid out by the ADA and the College of Sports Medicine. Um, it requests, so it's really complicated, which is why I didn't cover it here. So you're going to want to cover at least 5 muscle groups, and you're going to want to do 3 sets, and your sets are going to want to be 8 to 12 reps, and you're going to want to have increasing weight, and there are all these things, and you're going to want to do muscles like 2 to 3 times a week, and you don't want to ever separate the exercise by more than 2 days a week. It's very complicated. So there are some specifics. I don't know that I would lose a lot of sleep getting tied up in those specifics. Start doing strength training. Push-ups count. Sit-ups count. Planks count. All of those things count. Squats at home count. All of these things count as muscle work. Start doing those. Lunges, jumping squats, all of these things work those muscles. Tricep extensions with cans of vegetables in your hand, or a 2-liter bottle of water or soda or whatever in your hand. Bye, Suzanne. Have a great week. Thank you. All of these things count. Anything that's working your muscles count. And definitely working your muscles is important because those muscles also alter that insulin resistant effect. So use that also. It will improve that insulin resistance. And remember, this improvement on insulin resistance doesn't just occur for the 30, 45 minutes that you are exercising. This effect where we no longer require insulin to move that glucose inside the cell can last for up to 72 hours, 48 to 72 hours after a single exercise event. Okay. So all of these things that you're doing accumulate over time and just improve your cell's insulin resistance. So that's strength training, Maricela. Don't let it keep you from doing it. Just start doing some of it. As your muscles get stronger, as you get more proficient at exercising, as you get better at carving out an hour a day for you to exercise, which is most of the battle for most women, as you get better at doing that, you can start getting more specific and more precise on some of those exercise, what you're doing specifically for your strength training. Same thing with like balance and stretch. You should do those twice a week for about an hour a week. That's what the guidelines say. Is it still better to start with 15 minutes twice a week? Absolutely it is. Can you find yoga training online? Yep, you can. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Amazon Prime. You can find it anywhere. Just start with something and then start moving into the guidelines. But really, guys, the fact of the matter is start moving today. Start doing it consistently. Get cleared from your doctor to be sure. And then start adding intensity. Okay? That is going to be what's going to help you use this really slick trick to help your insulin resistance. Okay. And it's going to help it quickly. These are the things that are going to drive those blood sugars down pretty quickly. I hope everybody found this helpful. There will be a replay of this on the YouTube channel. So if you are ever wondering or questioning or want to hear it again or want to send your friends, please do all of those things. If you want to set up that reversal assessment call, go to calendly.com/DelaneMD or send me a message, Delane@DelaneMD.com, and we'll get you set up. All right, guys. Thanks for showing up. I'll talk